Well, here we go. After a few more weeks, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 weeks, back again with the Elystan Morgan. And a lot of things have happened. The High Court, Trump, everything else. We'll go through them all now. First of all, people are very confused about the Royal Prerogative. And what is worse, the media, especially some of the right-wing press, have been vile in relation to the judgment of the judges. Take us through, where did the Royal Prerogative come, what it means. Take us through the whole process.
Many centuries ago, the kings of England and Queen Elizabeth I believed in divine right, that they had been placed where they were by Almighty God, that they were answerable to Almighty God, and they were not answerable to Parliament nor to the people.
Yeah.
So that if Parliament took a certain line, they felt that they were not only entitled but sometimes obliged to cancel that and to change it.
And they had the right without question.
They had, in those days, of course, the divine right to do that.
Yeah.
Henry VIII did it regularly. The matter came to a head in 1610. Sir Edward Coke was the leading lawyer, leading judge of his day, and he was the head of the King's Bench. And he said to the king, "You can't do that. You are limited by certain obligations to Parliament."
That was a clever move.
He put his head on the block. It was one of the most gallant and honourable acts in the history of English law. Then you had the Civil War.
Did he lose his head?
No.
No.
You had the Civil War.
Yeah.
And there again, of course, the power of the king was very seriously clipped. You had then, in the 18th century, the Bill of Rights, and you had the Glorious Revolution, all whittling down the power of the king, the monarch, in relation to Parliament. During the First World War, you had a great deal of careful definition, because there was an attempt to use the Royal Prerogative rather than pass Acts of Parliament confiscating German property. And there's a very well-known case that went to the House of Lords in those days, the Attorney General versus De Kaiser Hotel Limited. That's the classic case. What's the situation today? The Royal Prerogative is whittled down to almost nothing. There is a remnant of it left. It's a very formal remnant. It means that if the United Kingdom wanted to form a treaty, to enter into treaty with another country, it could be done through the Royal Prerogative. The treaty would be valid in public international law. But before that treaty can affect the position of any British subject, either improve or to worsen, there has to be legislation. In other words, it
has to go through Parliament.
Has to be written into our domestic law. Yeah. As simple as that.
So the first thing now...
In other words, it is a largely ceremonial situation.
Yeah.
And a ceremonial situation does not allow it to trigger Article 50. That's what the court found.
And all the hoo-ha, all the noise from the Brexiteers about the judgment, it was nothing to do with how the referendum, the outcome of the referendum.
It could have been a definition of the Royal Prerogative in relation to any other context. The short point about it is that this comes about because of the embarrassing situation the government finds itself in. Normally, it wouldn't be thinking of the Royal Prerogative. It would pass an Act of Parliament or a resolution.
When was the last Royal Prerogative used? You reckon that? I'm not putting you on the spot. Must be decades ago.
I don't know, but largely ceremonial matters, treaties, I've no doubt. Yes.
So to bring it up was a sign of weakness?
It was a sign of impotence. What the government would have liked to have done, of course, would have been to have passed a resolution in the House of Commons, or indeed to pass an Act of Parliament, and for that to trigger Article 50. They can't do it because of the rebellion of Tory members who are for Brexit.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
Who are against Brexit.
Who are against Brexit.
Yeah.
They can't do it. And that being so, they are in an impotent position. The mandate of a government, legal mandate, and the moral mandate of a government depends upon one thing above all, that is the capacity to carry the House of Commons. It hasn't got that capacity.
Yeah.
It hasn't got that mandate. Yeah. It's searching now in the cobwebs of medievalism to find some sort of excuse.
Now, I'm being a devil advocate now, understand? Farage would tell you, but the people have spoken.
Well, I don't think Farage is one of the greatest prophets of our day. No.
But in other words, it was first of all an advisory referendum.
That's the whole point, you see. The point was made in the House of Lords the other day by a peer who had worked on the committee stage of the bill creating the referendum. It was an advisory referendum. Yeah. So there was no need for it to be regarded as binding at all.
So why do you reckon the Tories of the government decided to try and make it as if it was binding?
Because in their supreme miscalculation, they thought they could carry it. And then that they could say, oh, it's binding. They thought it would be binding and it would suit them.
Yeah, because I think the judgment of the High Court...
How wrong they were.
Yes, because the High Court said it wasn't binding.
Quite.
So where do we go from here now?
We await the decision of the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. There will be no appeal anywhere at all. It will be final and absolute and total. And if the decision is the same as that of last week in the High Court, the government are in deep trouble, and it very probably will be an election. How do you fight that election? I'm not sure. Do you have two Tory parties? One for Brexit and one against? The Tory party has split more than once, as you know, in the last 200 years.
Yes.
It can do so again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as far as Labour is concerned, Labour is in no position to
do
anything
not effective
at all.
No.
Not a credible, effective opposition at the moment.
Yeah.
Worse luck.
Yeah. If the Supreme Court says, yes, she can use the Royal Prerogative, then...
Or she's in the pound seats. Yes. And she'll be jumping for joy.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean that Parliament is seriously weakened for the future?
What it means is that they have been clinging to the cobwebs of medievalism, of a royal diktat.
Yes.
It would be a ludicrous situation if that were so, but I don't think...
See, what's ironic for me is this, right? There were all the Brexiteers saying, let's bring back control. We want decisions made in Parliament. Let's have democracy. All those things. And now they're clinging to a little thing that is 400-500 years ago.
All guff and nonsense. And clinging, as I say, swinging on the cobwebs of medieval tyranny. And that's what it was. The tyranny of a monarch who was determined to overrule Parliament.
And here we are in the 21st century, they're still trying to keep it going.
One of the great and most massive ironies of our time. But undoubtedly, the decision made by the Supreme Court next month will be probably the most important decision that a British court of law has arrived at in the last century.
Yeah. One final thing. What do you think of the attitude of the government to the attacks on these three judges by the press?
I think that government is acting disgracefully. At worst, and I'm in no position to judge this, at worst it could be that it's souping up the opposition to the judges. I suspect that there is some of that. But at very best, it's no use saying, well, we accept that the judges have acted honestly and within their roles and competently. In the situation that exists with the scurrilous attacks made on the judges, dreadful attacks, there are two things that the government must do. First, to say, we back the judges, they're right. Secondly, a big stick on the back of the press.
Yes,
they won't do that.
For what they did, yeah.
They won't do that.
The captions, three pictures, the enemies of the people.
That's why I say that the failure, I think, to give the press a real caning on account of this shows a lack, I think, of sincerity and honesty.
Yeah. Well, Dylan, that's it. Lord Judge, ex-Judge Elystan Morgan, diolch yn fawr.